Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Eric Coleman with Rommana Software and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar, Feature-Based Project Management for Agile and Non-Agile Projects by Dr. Magdy Hanna. We're excited you're able to join us today. Set aside an hour to attend this webinar. This webinar is sponsored by Rommana Software, the leaders in application lifecycle management technology. For more information on how Rommana ALM can help you or your organization, please visit rommanasoftware.com. This webinar is one of a series of free webinars offered by Rommana Software. Be sure to join us for the next webinar in the series, Gain Full Control of Your Project Activities with Integrated ALM by Dr. Magdy Hanna on November 17th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. To learn more about this and other webinars in the series, go to rommanasoftware.com. You may submit your questions at any time by using your question box in your GoToWebinar window. Today's presenter will answer as many questions within the time allowed at the end of today's session. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available for viewing within 48 hours at rommanasoftware.com. At the end of today's webinar, you'll be asked to complete a short survey. At Rommana Software, we strive to provide the highest quality educational resources for the public and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to complete this short survey. I will now turn the webinar over to today's presenter, Dr. Magdy Hanna. Dr. Hanna?
Thank you, Eric. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule to be with me this morning. Excited to be with you this hour to share with you my experience and my approach to project management. I know you can see the graphic for Rommana ALM in front of you. That's, as Eric said, this webinar is presented to you by Rommana Software, the leader in integrated application lifecycle management. And why is it that I am bringing the chart here? Because what I'm going to teach you today, and I hate to use the word teach, but what I'm going to share with you today is an approach to project management that is not provided or supported by any tool you might know of. Including, of course, even Microsoft Project. The approach is mainly based on features as opposed to based on tasks and resources. And I've been working on this approach for so many years, and Rommana ALM as an integrated application lifecycle management tool, or as I should say set of tools, does support that. It is the only tool, and because I am, of course, the chief architect of that tool. So here is a project management component. So everything I will share with you today is supported by Rommana ALM. But of course, in order for a tool to do that or to support feature-based project management, it also has to have the features, whether they are requirements or user stories. It has to have everything else as part of the tool. So that's how a tool like Rommana can actually support and allow you to manage your projects based on features. This is just telling you that Rommana has been around for a while. It has been awarded a number of awards, the best ALM tool, the best cloud solution, and the best requirement tool. Well, to start, in this presentation and in this methodology, I want to just make it clear that when I say a feature is either a requirement or a user story. So a feature is rather a generic name. So if you are associating a specific meaning to the word feature, please, for this discussion, it's either, so a requirement is a feature, a user story is a feature. You can also refer to any one of them as a feature. So why is it that features are so important when it comes to project management? Of course, features are important in general because that is what we are building the software or the system to support. But if you think about it from a project management perspective, it is the most critical thing in a project. It is the feature we are building. It is the feature we are delivering to our customers. Our customers do not care about anything, literally anything in the project. They don't care about tasks. They don't care about who is working. The only thing they care about is What am I getting? What features am I getting? And when am I getting them? And customers who care about the cost, they also care about how much it's going to cost me. So this is exactly what you would care about if you were to bring, say, a contractor to work on your house to do anything for you, whether to build a new house or to remodel your house. All that you're interested in as a customer is what? Is what you're getting, how long it's going to take, and how much it's going to cost. And to me, these are three things we must always focus on when we manage projects. Now, who is doing what, when is a specific person doing it, that's beyond the point. It might be of interest to the project manager, but most importantly, we need to answer to our customers. Even when we speak about our timeline, okay? Features affect the delivery. A more complex feature will take time than smaller feature. If the customer changes their mind during the process, whether the process is agile or not, then our timeline will change. All right? Features are the ones or the things in our project that we design for, we code, and we test. Most importantly, features are related to other features, and changes to features present some level of risk. When a customer changes their mind about a user story or about a requirement, obviously this might affect other things, and we need to look at what else we need to worry about. So I want to share with you this picture that describes exactly what I'm talking about. Why features are important. If you look in any project at all, a feature has connections. And now it strikes me badly when I see some tools out there that allows you to maintain user stories. And for some reason, for some strange reason, user stories are standalone. They're just user stories. The feature, the user story or the requirement is nothing by itself. The feature or user story means a lot when we see the connections with other things, right? From a development perspective, certainly a feature will have some database tables that will be designed by the database designer. It has some design components within the system. It has some criteria if you're using user stories. It has, of course, the most importantly, the code that we write. It has a screen layout, and I'm not being comprehensive here or exhaustive, so there might be many other things the development team would worry about when they speak about a requirement or a user story, okay? And what, as you can see here, the arrow is double-headed, meaning that the link between a feature and those things should be both ways. So you should be able to put your hands on a user story or a requirement and be able to tell which one of these. I mean, how many of us really know which components of the code were written to implement a given user story, or which database tables? Developers need to do that. Developers absolutely need to have this kind of traceability, and if they don't, then they are developing in the dark. When it comes to testing, similar things. If you're using the concept of scenarios, and scenarios come from requirements or a user story, then at least you should be able to put your hand on a requirement or a user story and see the scenarios that we have written for that scenario, for that user story. If you're using acceptance criteria, the same apply. Of course, each user story or each requirement here has test cases. They have test scripts, and the traceability back and forth is very critical. When you get bug reports, it is very important to see what user stories or what bug reports, what user stories or what requirements those bug reports are about. Not that just we get the bug report and we try to analyze it and fix it. We need to find out which user story or which requirement. Now, at the top here is the project management component, and the project manager has a lot of things. All the time, and the effort estimates need to be done by feature. Okay, you say this feature is going to take that much time to build. Not only that, a feature has tasks associated with it, and the typical tasks for a feature are things like analyzing it, designing the feature, writing the code for the feature, possibly writing the test cases for the feature, running the test cases. These are the typical tasks for any user story or requirement. And you need to know actually how much time each one of those are taking. This is project management 101. If we are not keeping a track of data like this, by the rules of CMMI, we are not even level 1. You realize that? So you do not want to build software while you are below level 1 CMMI. If you're not keeping a track of your estimates and how much time, how much effort is taking you to do things, and as we're going to see, not only that, but you're also keeping track of your actual time, the actual time, the actual number of hours, the actual cost, and you're comparing your estimates to the actual. If you're not doing that, I don't care if it is Agile or not Agile project, and I don't like it when Agile advocates say, well, we don't do this in Agile. Well, does this mean that it is right? If you don't do it in Agile, then you're really driving Agile to failure. Agile is a great approach that provides a lot of things. So let's take all the good things that are in Agile and use them in the context of software engineering as we learned it over the years. So many projects, forgive me to say that, many projects that use Agile as an approach, they have no clue about software engineering, including the things I'm talking about. And of course, the excuse is, we don't have time for that. Let's look at the left-hand side here. I mean, of course, when it comes to progress, let me first go back here. When it comes to progress, I understand that in Agile, we have charts. We have the burn down chart that shows us how many user stories we completed, how many still to be done. But progress is much more than how many user stories we finished versus how many we have yet to work with. Okay, we're talking about within each user story. How many user stories did we write the design for? How many user stories did we write the code for? How many user stories are now in testing? And how many user stories we can release in this sprint at this point? This is important. This is knowing where you are. Because as the old saying says, if you do not know where you are and you do not know where you want to be, then you could do whatever you want. Let's look at the list here. I mean, again, I have not been very exhaustive here. A requirement or a user story, as I said, does not live by itself. It is connected to many other things, all right? Now, of course, I've worked with very complex requirements. I worked with very complex user stories, especially when we use user stories. As you know, a user story does not provide much information about anything. Even if you are writing some acceptance criteria for the user story, those acceptance criteria are only good to help the tester and help the developer to make sure that the user story has been implemented correctly. Okay. However, there are other artifacts that will provide more information that helps developers do what they're supposed to do. Help the developers write their design, their code. There are artifacts that will help testers come up with their test cases and test scenarios and test scripts. And these are the things I'm putting on the left. All right. I mean, I was dealing with a user story the other day that's talking about the system is going to be making decision about something. And there is no place in the user story or in the acceptance criteria where I can describe the logic, or say the algorithm that the system must use to make that decision, I had to go and use a decision table for that. Now, where does this decision table belong? Well, it belongs here, and it should be linked back to the feature or the user story. The same is true if some of you know about state models, all right, or any other design models, okay, or any other documents, whatever they are. Sometimes we have a document from the customer that describes how this feature or how this user story should be implemented. And I just wonder, for those of us who are using user stories or requirements, where do you put that? Most importantly, what is the relationship between that user story or that requirement I am looking at and the other user stories and the other requirements? In some Agile projects, as you know, sometimes we get a larger requirement and we break it down to multiple user stories. Well, great. But how do I have the link between the higher level requirement and all these user stories? If I were to put my hand on a user story, how do I link it back to a specific requirement? Well, it turns out that in Agile projects, everything in the backlog is user stories. So I take 5 or 6 or 7 user stories to implement them in this sprint. But then I don't know if those user stories are part of the same requirement, if 1 or 2 of them are part of another requirement, even if you are not using user stories and you're using requirements. The relationship between one requirement and another is very critical. And if you are managing your project and you are working on a feature or a requirement, you need to know what other requirements or what other features are related to this, because that means that you have to plan that other requirement with the same requirement. You have to plan testing them together and so on. So I'm not going to even justify for you the importance of the relationship between one feature and another. Some projects, Agile or not, use cases. Now, of course, use cases are different from user stories. Very different. If you want to know the difference between requirements, user stories, use cases, scenarios, test cases, whatever, I have a course coming soon online on understanding these things that I teach for the International Institute for Software Testing. But use cases are very different animals that some projects do. And the use cases sometimes are part of a feature, and sometimes they combine a number of features, and you got to maintain the relationship between the use cases you have and the features you have, and so on. Of course, I don't want to go through explaining each one of those, but we'll show when I get into some more details. So if you want to talk about managing your project with features in mind, my apology, hold on. Here are some of the things that I'm asking you to keep track of. You want to be able to create and manage tasks for development and for testing for each feature. And the typical tasks, as I said, are analyzing, designing, whatever, coding, writing test cases, running the test cases. All these are tasks, and you want to allocate those to each one of the features or the requirements or the user stories. I understand in Agile projects we do things much faster, but no one should tell me that we don't have time to keep track of this, because you know what? You are not doing it yourself. The tool you are using is supposed to be doing it. You're not sitting down keeping track of these things. When I show you the approach, I will show you how to do this in Excel spreadsheet, but I will also show you how to do in Rommana ALM, such that if you are not going to buy Rommana ALM, which is really, you can acquire it for a very, very low price, then go ahead and use Excel spreadsheets. What matters for me is that you do it. All right, so you got to look at risks. Every feature has a level of risk associated with it. And the risks I'm talking about here are the things that could possibly happen in the course of the project that would hinder the team from delivering that feature, whether it is user story or requirement. If we are going to start, if we're planning a user story for a given sprint, now, shouldn't we think about, is there a possibility that we may not be able to deliver that user story at the end of the project, at the end of the sprint? Doesn't it make sense to think about those risks and see how we would deal with those risks if they should happen? Or do we want to start working with the user story and we discover in the middle of the road that we cannot complete it? And I'm not talking about, do we have the time to do it? No, I'm talking about other technical and managerial risks, things that could happen in the course, whether it is a third-party software that we may not get our hands on, whether it is another system that we need to have in order to be able to test the user story, and so on. As we are going to see, timelines do not make any sense if all what you're putting on the timeline are the tasks. You need to put the tasks and you put to put the features that those tasks apply to, as we're going to see in a little bit. I have another screen, I believe, on managing projects with features in mind. So if you have user stories or requirements for which you're writing scenarios or acceptance criteria, you need to be able to link the scenarios back to the user story or to the criteria or to the requirement, right? If you're talking about the cost versus the estimates, and you have to be able to say this feature with those changes is going to cost it that much, and you should be able to see on one sprint or on one release how much time you're spending on each one of those. So with that, I'm going to put in front of you this very simple table. My apology for the fuzzy picture here, but this is what I call the minimal practice. The minimal practice. And that's not even involving features or user stories or requirements. This simply says any project manager, any Agile coach, any Scrum Master, doesn't matter who's running the show, has to always keep track of the estimated number of hours and the actual number of hours that each task is taking us. And then based on the actuals and the estimates, they calculate a percentage of deviation. How much did our estimate deviate from the actual? Now, again, as I said, this is project management 101. If you're running a project and you're not doing this, you're not managing anything. You are not managing anything. And again, by the guidelines of CMMI, you are not even level 1 CMMI. I am curious to see how many of you would say, yes, in our project. And maybe before I do that, I'd like to ask a question. How many of you work on Agile projects? Because it makes it a little bit different. So if you are working on an Agile project, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, got about 30%. 30% of the people with me today are working on Agile projects. Now, in general, I'd like to see, I'm going to bring your hands down here. Now, if any one of you is able to say, yes, in our project, Agile or not, we are doing this. At any time, I can tell you for whatever task, like whichever, it's writing the code or and I understand that some of you are not project managers or not Scrum Masters, so maybe you don't know. So if you don't know, you don't have to answer. Okay, but if you know for sure your project keeps track of these estimates and actuals and percentage of deviation, then please raise your hand. Okay, I got 2 people. As I said, I'm going to assume that some of the rest do not actually know if this is happening or not. Okay, I have a couple of questions here. I like to answer my questions as we go. I have a question here that says, how much of time is expected to be spent on the planning of the feature before a team goes into the development mode? Well, this is a big question. It depends on whether you're doing Agile or non-Agile, of course. And if you're doing Agile, it is simply the user story and the sprint planning meeting that normally we pull out the user story from the backlog. We meet, we discuss the user story, and we include it or not included in the plan. Sorry, on the sprint. But that's very short period of time. We're talking about an hour, nothing more than that. An hour for the whole sprint, or maybe 2 hours for the whole sprint that has possibly 4 or 5 or 6 user stories. So I'm not sure really we spend any time when it is Agile. In non-Agile project, we take much more time than that. Now, of course, when you say planning the feature before we get into development, again, that's another big question, because to me, anything that you do, and of course, if you attend some of my classes, you'll see what we need to do before development teams start developing, and really you'll see that I'm moving development all the way to the back. So just an estimate here, at least 50% of the time that we are allocating to a given feature need to be spent on analyzing the feature, because that also includes coming up with the scenarios or the acceptance criteria. I'm always recommending that developers should not ever move to development before we all agree in every way how this feature is going to work. And that, as I said, that includes developing your scenarios if you're going to be using scenarios, or developing your acceptance criteria. So at the very least, 50% of the time should be spent on that. The other 50% will be used to design / code / test the feature. All right. Jeff is saying that I track my estimates and actuals on every task, but most teammates on my projects do not, and it is not a requirement. Well, thank you for sharing this with us, Jeff. Obviously, you've been somewhere in project management. You learned software engineering, okay? And I'm just curious to know, is this an Agile project or not? Because that discipline you're talking about is very hard to enforce in an Agile project. All right, but thanks for sharing this with us. I have another comment here. Sprint plan determines the value of the work to be done or attempted in a sprint. And the CSM limits the WIP, the work for a team. Okay, I'm sure I'm assuming this is just a comment here. I'm trying to see. All right. Around the feature, test criteria, and PO acceptance criteria are established prior to attempting work. Yes, what I'm hearing here is exactly what I said. Everything needs to be determined before we start working with the feature, and everything I'm talking about here is analyzing, determining what's going to be in the sprint, taking each user story or a feature, coming up with the acceptance criteria or scenarios, making sure that we all understand what it means, what done will mean for this specific feature. Allow me, please, to go on because I have a lot of material to cover, and now I'm glad we have a lot of reactions from people. All right. I don't see a question that I must answer, so all these are good comments that people sharing with us. All right, let me go back here. So that's what I refer to as the minimal practice. And back then in the older days when I managed projects in the late 80s, that's what I was required to do. Of course, there was no Agile at the time. Keep that in mind. So it will all traditional waterfall model. But if someone if a project lead or even a developer did not keep track of that, remember in the early days of my life, I worked as a contractor developer, and as a contractor, you're supposed to provide estimates upfront. How much is going to take you to implement this feature, okay, or this set of features? When I had a team of developers working, I had to provide an estimate. Now, in order to provide an estimate, I could not just say anything. I have to take one feature at a time and break it down in a table like this. This is not a joke. I have done this. I'm telling you this. I have done what you're looking at here. In Lotus 1, 2, 3, if any one of you was born at the time Lotus 1, 2, 3, or is aware of Lotus 1, 2, 3, this is long time. This is in the late 80s to the early 90s. So we didn't have Excel, so I used this in Lotus 1, 2, 3, and with literally every feature, I said, here's how much time is going to take me to do the design or take my team. Here's how much time will do the take. So these are the 4 simple tasks that I said these are the tasks that we will perform on each feature. And I had to provide estimated hours, and I had to have developers keep track of the actuals. Now, of course, because we were contractors, that we need to calculate the cost to the client, so we had to do this. And the way we calculate this, of course, you multiply, there is even another level of details that goes here that says, okay, for those 35 hours, for example, I'm going to have a team lead is spending about 10 hours and then a developer spending another 25 hours. And the hourly rate of the team lead is that much, and which is different from the hourly rate of the developer. You multiply 10 by the hourly rate plus 25 by the hourly rate, you come up with the number. And this gets calculated, of course, based on the actuals. Okay, there's actually here, as I'm going to show you in Rommana, that 35 hours or 44 hours are broken down by who is participating in that. Now, I know in Agile project, everyone says, oh, we don't have time to do this. Well, I mean, if you're going to look at Agile as a small team thing, fine, don't do it. But the world around us now are demanding that Agile becomes an enterprise approach, okay? There is so much going on now. In fact, I was just reading a book, 2 chapters from a book last night. The actual book is going to be released Friday, that's today, at midnight. And I'm waiting to get it from Amazon because there's so much stuff you get when you order it the very first person at midnight tonight. It's Almanac 2, Agile Almanac 2. And this is all about scaling Agile to be an enterprise. If we're going to do this, I mean, the Army and the whole United States Department of Defense is looking into using Agile. If we're going to use Agile, we got to do this. And in this aspect, there shouldn't be any difference between what we did back then in the traditional non-Agile approach and what we do in Agile. So guys, this is not going to go away. I have published something, I have posted something on LinkedIn, and I was very disappointed to see some reactions from some of the Agile people who said, Magdy, that was back then in the days of waterfall model. In Agile, we don't do this. Well, guess what? You're wrong. You're wrong when you tell me that in Agile you don't do this. Unless you want to use Agile as just a small team thing, you have a team of 4 or 5 people, you're going to do a sprint in 2 weeks and you put it out and you don't care about keeping track of anything. That's not going to continue. Trust me. So if you're an Agile coach, if you're a Scrum Master, if you're a product owner, you have to do this. I told you, I did this back then in using Lotus 123. I did it again recently using Excel, but then I decided to say, you know what, this is a lot of manual work. I am not going to do this. So that's why I architected Rommana ALM to do that, all that stuff for me. And now Rommana is commercial product that's using all that. Okay, so that's simply, as I say, cost estimation by feature. And you put all the tasks here. Here you have the total, your total, okay, of all the features, okay. And I'm sorry, so that one here. So this is a total for each feature, and this is a total for across all features. So if you have those 3 features in one sprint, you have to know how many estimated hours, how many actual hours, and here is your deviation, 4%. And the 4% simply means that you went slightly above what you had estimated. This is not bad at all, but over time you learn and you do better estimates. Okay, another practice. This is a work assignment by feature. Again, in Agile, we say, Joe's going to work on this user story. Kathy is going to work on that user story. I don't understand it. Is Joe going to do everything about the user story? Fine, if that's what you want them to do. But at the very least, there is a developer and there is a tester for every user story. Okay, at least. So for every task, again, at the top here, I just put some example of tasks here. Those tasks are not, I mean, you could have any tasks here. You could say whatever, user interface design, database design, coding, test design. So I assumed just to fit them on one slide, I just decided to put 4 tasks. And each task is assigned to a given member of the team. Okay? So everyone, even if we are in a ad hoc Agile situation, just have them pull this out, pull a user story out and put that. Now, of course, I'm showing this to do this in Excel spreadsheet, but it might be too time consuming. That's why I'm going to show you how the tool does this. Now, another one, the task duration by feature. And this is, when did we start to win? Remember, this one here showed only the estimates. So for each feature, each task, how many hours estimated. This one here, it explicitly talks about start date and end date of each feature. So for this feature, we're going to start analysis on this date. We're going to end in this date. For the same feature, we're going to start design here and there. And I'm going to show you in a little bit. Okay. In fact, here it is. This is a timeline. This, what you're looking at actually is an actual picture of the timeline feature from Rommana ALM. Okay, I could show it to you live. Actually, I better show it to you live because you'll see even much more data than, so let me quick here, and I don't intend to take much of your time here. So let me log into, that's one of my project teams. Okay, when you log into Rommana, you can log as a site manager or a project manager. I just want to show you the dynamics that happen in a chart like that. Okay, so I'm going to go straight to reports. Okay, this is one of the reports. So all the reports that have to do with project management are here. You have your user story reports here, you have all your testing reports here. So I'm going to click on project management report. It allows me to filter by release or by sprint. I'm just going to leave it as is. It pulls a lot of data. As you can see, it's very, now, what's happening here on the left are your requirements or your user stories. The nice thing about it is everything is a link. First of all, if I put the cursor on it, it gives me some information about that. If I want to see some details, guess what? All what I have to do is to click on it. Okay, so, okay. Okay, this is actually to take me to assign things to the, I don't want to do this because it's going to take time. So now for each one of those tasks, you can see here, for this one here, I have prototyping is going to start from June 15 until June 18. And if I put the cursor on it, it tells me who is assigned to it. Let's look at the test design. Assigned to who? This is, by the way, this is just the one that says test to test. It's just a test team member. Okay. If I look at here, the test execution, or this one here, the coding, it shows you the team members that are assigned to the task and how many estimated hours for each one of them and the actual hours because they didn't start yet. I just pulled out a project where no work has been done yet. So this is another task. The percentage of completion of that task is 0%, and it shows me. So each task, if I were to click here on, say, test design, do I want to edit? I don't want to edit anything. I can edit the task duration here, or I can edit other properties of the task. And I can see here, and this opens the task screen where I can read. This is just a cut and paste for testing purposes. Okay. Now, if I click here on the user story, show user story details, I'll say yes. And that gives me the user story screen. Okay, and that shows me you the rest of the stuff. If this is a user story, okay, and I have the acceptance criteria. Well, in this case, I don't have any acceptance criteria. I can add acceptance criteria very easily here, as you can imagine. So I can just write acceptance criteria 1, acceptance criteria 2. It's very simple to add the acceptance criteria, as you can see. And later on, you can come later on and say, has it been tested or not? And if it has been tested, you can say if it passed or failed. I have not seen anything like this in the tools that maintain user stories. There's just to allow you to do, I'm going to delete those ones, by the way, so that they don't sit there, but you can add acceptance criteria. But here are all the other things I talked about. Here are the tasks that are defined for this specific user story. Okay. Here are the scenarios. Now, by the way, if there are 3 dots here, that means there is details behind it. So if I were to click here, it gives me all the scenarios for that user story. You've got to be able to do that. So, and if I were to go to from the other end, from the scenarios, I can come back to, like if I were to click here, for example, on one of those here, I'm going to click on scenario number 41. Okay, you can see I have the breadcrumbs here. And the breadcrumbs tell me that this scenario I'm looking at is for user story number 6. So I can click on this now. That will bring me back to the user story. So you should be able to trace back and forth. Okay, I don't have any use cases defined for that user story. I have the source information if I'm interested in it. And this source information says there was a meeting on October 16, 2010. I can change this any way I want. And so on. There's all the reviews. If you remember my chart here, this one here, and that's very critical here. If you look down here, that says review notes. What are these review notes? These are some of the most important thing about a user story that I cannot hide. I have to keep track of, because when people review a requirement or a user story, they are going to write comments, and all these reviews are online. So that's how I do all what I have to do. If I'm reviewing the specific user story, I can click here. I can start adding. So I can review this user story. I can write a comment. I can read the comments that people have written, and so on. And those are maintained as part of the user story. Okay, so Another thing, let me go back, take you to my slide here, and my apology, take you back and forth. If you look here, okay, any functional component or any functionality, if I'm looking at the user story here, I need to know, as I said earlier, user story does not stand by itself, okay, but rather it might be related to any other component, even called functional components. The functional components could be functionalities, okay? So somehow I need to maintain that association. So if I were to go here and go to reports, another report here I can look at is user stories to functional component mapping. If I click on that, as you can see, reports are very quick. If I display the report, it gives me on the left here all the user stories or requirements. On the top here, it gives me the functional components, and it tells me which part of which user story belongs to which functional components. Okay, that's very important. If I were to click on any one of those functional components, it gives me the hierarchy of the user actually gives me the details of those functional components. Let me close that. I have so many windows open now. If I were to click on this, I can change it. I can remove it if I wanted to, or I can click here and add one, click here to delete it. Very simple. If I say, well, that configure attributes component has this requirement and this requirement, or this user story and this user story. Okay, if I click save, it's done. Actually, I'm not even right, because it is saved on the spot. Okay, once you click, it saves. Okay, so that's why I can just remove it again. Yes. This is all test projects. It's not a real project, the data. All right, so back to my slides. I'm gonna peek into the questions in a little bit to see if there's any questions I need to answer. So that's the same chart we're looking at. This is another one. Okay, the test cases, the test coverage report. We call it test coverage report, but this is simply something you can do it in Microsoft Excel, and that shows the requirements or the user stories. How many tests have been written, how many of them were pre-designed versus how many of them were exploratory. That's very important, because in testing, when we ask testers to do the work, we want them to design tests up front and to write the test cases and write the test scripts. But we also know that at the time they start running the tests, they're going to find things that they need to test. And of course, I tell them all the time, if you find something you want to test that you feel like was not documented, go ahead and document it. It's very simple. That's why we put right here at the top, here, look at that. Ad hoc tests. And it tells you ad hoc tests or exploratory tests are those tests that you create on the fly as you're testing. And all what you have to do is click on this. I'm going to leave the screen. I don't need to save. And you start adding. These are all the ad hoc tests for this specific user story. Okay, obviously, the team, when they did this user story, did not do a very good job up front. They did not spend a lot of time designing the tests, but now they're coming later on while they're running the test cases that were designed, they're finding more things. So these are all, and if I were to create a new ad hoc test, it's very simple. As you can see, I only have to provide a title for the test case, for the test I'm going to be running, a description, very simple description. And then what do I expect to see as a result? Very simple. This is not a formal testing. I mean, Rommana has another place here where you define all the all the test sets and test cases with all the preconditions, the post conditions, and everything in details. This is the formal test design methodology, but this is ad hoc test approach that you do it on the fly. Okay, so I'll just back to the list. I don't have to add anything. I'll just even close that one. So if I were to go here to show you this report, now look at the data in the report. How many of them pre-designed? How many of them were done ad hoc / exploratory? How many of those tests are positive? How many of them are negative? Very critical. If you have attended my test design and test planning courses, I always encourage you to keep track of how much positive versus how much negative testing you're doing. Okay, because, and as I always recommend, it has to always be 50-50. Let me see if that report is available here. I'm gonna close this. So let me go here and go to reports, go to the test management reports. Come on, test case coverage report. I think it's the one. This case summary by user story. Oh, here. It's the one. And you can create your own reports. Yeah, here is very similar. This is the same report I was showing you, but in the tool. Okay, so on the left here you have your user stories. You have the user story title. This is a number. This is the user story title. How many tests? How many systematic or pre-designed? How many ad hoc or exploratory? How many failed? How many passed? Sorry, how many failed? How many passed? How many yet to be executed? Okay. How many blocked? And the blocked here means that you cannot execute them anyway because they're waiting on something else. And here it shows you the percentage of readiness. This report tells me that this user story, whatever it is, or this feature, is only 23% ready. And why is that? Because we had a total of 21 test cases, 10 of them failed. Okay? Only 5 passed, and another 6 that need to be executed. So this is very low in readiness. Only 6. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to build this. This report pulls the data from the tool. All what you have to do when you execute your tests, you put the pass-fail information in each test. So if someone wants to say, okay, let's look at this one here. This is what? We have a total of 24 test cases. Look at that. 22 of them passed. 2 failed. Okay, that takes care of the 24. Right? I don't have anything to be executed yet. That's why my percentage of completion is 100%. Why? Because we ran all the test cases. But completion does not mean readiness. These 2 columns are different. This simply say this user story or that feature is only 91% ready. It will be 100% ready if we were to fix these 2 problems. And of course, the nice thing about this report that every number is a link. So if I wanted to see what are those test cases, I click here. And it gives me the 2 test cases. And it tells me what they are. They failed. If I want to see the details of the test case, I click here. And it gives me the details of the test case. So the nice thing about when you're dealing with a web-based application, now guess what? I'm looking now at the test case that failed. Okay, no, actually I clicked on the scenario. Let me close that. So I clicked on the scenario that failed. So the test case number is right here. So remember, the way tests are designed is that you have a user story or requirement, you have scenarios, and then from the scenarios you write your test cases. You could also write test cases directly from the user. So here is the test case number. If I click on it, now I'm looking at the actual ad hoc. This is ADT ad hoc test case or ad hoc test. This is the details. Anyone can look here, says, okay, here's what we expected, here's what we got, and you may decide that this failure is not a huge thing, so you decide that you're going to pass. You cannot change it to pass, absolutely, because why you cannot change it to pass? Because there is a bug report that was created for that. And since the bug report is still open, then you cannot change it to pass. Okay, so I'm gonna change that. All right. This chart is very useful. Now, of course, you can do this in Excel. Now, I'm aware that some tools out there might give you some ability to do some of this. I don't know how many tools out there that gives you the differentiation between positive versus negative, the systematically designed versus ad hoc, and or the completion or readiness. Okay, so now it tells me that for this release or for this iteration, I am 80% ready for release. Okay, so back to my presentation because only I have few minutes left. This is probably the last traceability that I'm going to show you, which is linking the requirement or the user story back to the code. This is very critical. Developers need to know what code components have been written to implement a given user story. And in Rommana ALM, I'm not going to be able to show it to you now. We keep track of the code. The code is not in Rommana ALM, but Rommana links to code version control tools. Where developers store the code, and on the user story screen or the requirement screen or the scenario screen, you can click a button that says show code or display code modules. When you click on that, it shows you for a given feature which code modules are there. So for this feature, it will show you it has 2 pieces of code that was written to implement that. All right, I almost done. So with that, I want you to know that, I mean, you can go ahead and try Rommana ALM. You can get a free trial. What's really interesting to know is that Rommana is available in packages. You don't have to buy the whole thing. Okay, so if you look here, if you go to the rommanasoftware.com, you see all the packages and look at the prices. Look at the prices. It is as low as $10 per user per month. Okay, but that's only if you are going to install it in your server. If you're interested just using the cloud, it's $15 per user per month. And that's just the requirement. This is the user story that tells you here. This is a user story management, the change management, and the collaboration management for reviewing. If you want to add the test management component here, okay, and now it becomes $25 per user per month, and so on. If you want to get the whole thing, the complete Rommana ALM, which has everything you see, it is $50 per user per month, and you can get that for as short as 3 months. So if you have 5 users, $250, you know, for 3 months, that's $750, and you can become up and running in less than 1 hour, because when you click on order now here, you enter the information, and then everything is automated, as you can imagine. The whole deployment thing is automated. So we create the site for you. We send you an email with your site. Your site is going to look like something like that. Hold on. It's going to be your name or whatever name you choose, .rommana.com. And you log in and you start running, you start creating your first project. Let me quick here find out if there's any questions I need to ask. If you're interested in our team doing a demo for your team, please go ahead to the support link on the Rommana website and request a demo so someone will schedule it with you. So right here, request a demo. Okay. So let me see if I have questions I need to answer here. Now, I'm gonna take them from the end of okay, so the last question I received here is that, can you tag / rank features and tests? Yes, if you are dealing with user stories, we have the user story, we have the story points for the user story, if that's what you mean. And this is the ranking. The tagging, not sure, because tagging means different things. So if you look there, and if you can explain to me meaning that, okay, you're explaining it further here. 20 test cases, 5 are critical to pass, and we can accept. Yes, all these attributes are there, but also keep in mind, the nice thing about Rommana, it provides you to do what we call custom attributes. You can do two things for Rommana. You can add attributes that are there. You can look at the test case screen or the user story screen and add any attributes. If you want to add something called tag, and you say the tag can be this or this or this or that, and you don't see that any of the pre-built in attributes does what you want to do, you can just add a custom attribute. You can give it whatever name you want. You can give it the values it should be. So that's just the quick answer to your question. If I understand exactly what you need to do, I can tell you which attributes. But we have if you look here, if you're looking at a user story, there is so much attributes for the user story here. So let me grab this down here. There is a priority of the user story. There is a story points. There's a status of it. As I said, if you don't see any one of these attributes doing what you wanted to do, you're gonna add a custom attribute, and that custom attribute will appear in this area right here. Want to thank all of you for being with me for this 1 hour, and I hope to continue to see you in our future webinars. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hanna, for your time today. And I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar sponsored by Rommana Software, the leaders of lifecycle management technology. For more information on how Rommana ALM can help you or your organization, please visit rommanasoftware.com. You can follow Rommana Software on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube to find out more information about Rommana Software and news, events, and promotions. Thank you again for joining us today, and have a great day. Thank you, Dr. Hanna.
Thank you, Eric.